So I'm Melinda Kavanaugh. I'm a social work professor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. But I bring up the the big green thing? There we go, technology. Now, I currently conduct a lot of research in my position now, but I come from a clinical background in neurological social work. So I spent many years working with families with Huntington's and Parkinson's and MS. And what I found were families who had young children in the family. And not just having young children in the family, but had young children who were actively, often primarily involved in caregiving in the family. And this was many years ago, before really any research was out about this population. And so it really struck me that moving forward, as I do conduct research and as I be a part of neurological communities and families, that we really continue to highlight and focus on youth in the home who are participating in research, or who are participating in caregiving. So when I talk about kids as caregivers, there's a lot of different titles that are used across the world: young carers, young caregivers, caregiving youth. Whatever it is it's predominantly children under the age of 18 who are actively involved in care. In the United States, so all of this data that you see here up here is United States data, which unfortunately is incredibly slim. We have one national prevalence study which says approximately 1.4 million children under the age of 18 are involved in caregiving at any given time with any type of family member. What we do know from the research is that these kids are tremendously impacted. Not only are they having difficulty in school, they're having difficulty with concentration, with performance. Their psychological well-being is impacted. And it definitely impacts their social development. Their peers very rarely understand what they're going through. Their teachers very rarely understand what they go through. And even their other family members don't have a grasp of what that means to be a 10-year-old and be responsible for your parents' feeding tube, or to bathe and toilet your 50-year-old parent or 75-year-old grandparent, all of which I have seen in my clinical research and in my practice. One thing we do know, given all of that, is that this is a very vulnerable and isolated population, and particularly in the ALS and MND population, where we have very little data on what that experience is with these kids and these families. So I've done several studies. The first one involved families with Huntington's disease, and the second one was a pilot project that I did with the Wisconsin chapter, looking at what are some of the base experiences of children in the home providing care to a parent or a grandparent with ALS. So I personally interviewed 19 kids. In the Huntington study, I interviewed 40. I used a very similar measure. I created the measure for the study because, as you can guess, there are very few tools out there that are actually designated for this population. So I used a lot of well-validated measures around basics, around depression and family intervention and support. But in the study of the children in the ALS population, I had 19 kids just in the state of Wisconsin. They ranged in the age from 8 to 19. So I did have children as young as 8 years old who were identified as being caregivers for a family member. Which led to the current study that I'm doing. So as I said, we only have one national assessment of any young caregivers across the US, and that was done approximately 12 years ago. And that was just a broad assessment. So the study that I'm currently doing with the support of the National ALS Association is a national study of families and their children and their caregiving experiences, both from the parent and the child point of view. And something I wanted to follow up on what Steve said earlier is one of the questions that we actually ask in the parent level survey is, what is it like having a child be your caregiver? What is that experience? Because that's one thing we do not know much about. So to date, it's very That was probably really loud. My apology. To date, we actually have 65 families. We got one more family in the middle of making this survey. So we have 65 families so far from across the U.S. 21 identified children in the home as caregivers. So as you can see, we're a little over a third of all families have an identified child in the home as a caregiver. So we do hope to get lots more families, so if anybody's interested, please do let me know. I brought a shameless amount of cards and flyers about it. One thing I wanted to go into really quickly is I'm going to give a little information on what we know about the research, and then talk about how being involved in research itself can be a therapeutic tool for these kids. So this is just a brief snapshot of information of what we know about kids caring for a parent or a grandparent with ALS. And I think one of the most profound things is in the yellow box on the right. When asked information about the disease, 85% of these kids said that they didn't have enough information either about ALS or caregiving for ALS, and that included a lack of information from the ALS Association. And then below, when we talk about all of these wonderful presentations about caregiving and training, 74% of these kids had no idea what they were doing, but they were doing it, right? So one kid said, "I wing it." Now, I don't know about you, but that scared me a tiny bit. Also, another child said, "I just watched and I tried to do what my mom did." So one of the things that's going to be an issue. One of the things, I'm a professor, so I talk with my hands. One of the things that I also found is the level of communication, or the lack of communication in these families. A lot of families are very reticent to talk to their kids, even the ones who are involved in caregiving, about the process, the disease. They're concerned for scaring the child, for worrying them, for engaging them too much in something that may feel overwhelming for a child at a younger developmental stage. So I had that in mind as I'm interviewing these kids, right? I'm asking very emotional questions. What's it like to bathe in toilet and feed a parent? Sometimes they feel invasive. Can you talk to me about this experience? I'm questioning an isolated population, which you have to be very careful and very cognizant of. You have to be prepared afterward for mental health support, for social support. You have to be prepared to engage that child. And you also have to be prepared for maybe some pushback or some resistance. I don't know that I really want to talk about this with you, total stranger. Yeah, my parents said I could do it, and yeah, I'm going to do it, but I feel a little awkward and uncomfortable. So all of these things were going through my mind as I'm interviewing these kids, thinking, how can I be prepared for what they're going to say at the end? So I turn off the tape recorder, and I say, "So how was that?" Right? To be true, quite a few of the kids were crying at this point. I had several kids who cried all the way through. I tried on many occasions to stop the interview. No, I'm okay. Some were just quiet. And then I wasn't sure what to be prepared for, but this is what I got. "Thank you. No one has ever asked me about caregiving. I always felt like I was the only one. And you know what? It made me feel better just to talk about it." So these are kids that not only do they live in isolation because they're doing things that their other peers have no concept of what it is that they're doing. Other adults, not only in the home but in the community, have no idea to ask, "Oh, hey, by the way, I know your dad has ALS. Are you doing anything to help him out?" We ask, "Oh, is it hard to have a parent with ALS?" And very often the kids will open up about that. But we don't ask that extra step question about, are you involved in their care? What is that like? How can I help you? What kind of support can we create around you and your family? And so, while this wasn't part of the actual research, this part was, I think, the most profound for me because of what I expected. And I found this actually in my Huntington's research, so it's not isolated just to ALS kids. It is young carers who are desperate for acknowledgement. These are kids who say in the research, so this is some of the qualitative research that I've done before, asking about how can people be supportive? What are the things you need? How can people provide care and information for you? And the kinds of things they said is, I want my friends to get it. I want people to have an understanding attitude. And I want people to treat our family as normal. You know, a lot of kids said, I feel like that weird kid because their mom is in a wheelchair, or their dad has all these, tubes and things, or he uses a computer device to talk and it sounds kind of Star Trek-y, Kids want support groups and they want to care about them as a caregiver. So this is from the research. But the slide before was afterward, just me debriefing and, expecting them to say things that were maybe a little different. But what they really said was overall, thank you. And without exception, every young carer in all of the research that I've done has said something along the lines of, thank you, no one has ever asked me this before. And they felt just a little better just being a part of that interview. So one of the takeaways I have for this is, now there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for research, but whether it's being in research or whether it's just being with your families and working in the clinic and working with the adults and helping them understand that kids are actually fairly resilient and they usually know a whole lot more than we give them any credit for knowing. Those of you who have kids in the audience can grasp that. But what they really want is to be able to have their situation normalized. And to do that, you have to acknowledge it and you have to bring it up in the open and actually have conversations about it without it feeling awkward and uncomfortable and weird that this is part of the conversation. And one of the things that's really important about engaging kids is that it's very carer-centered. It's that whatever program or whatever support program or support service that you're going to create, by having kids engaged in the conversation, that's not only going to increase their buy-in, but it's going to have that program becoming kind of ground up, if you will. So a lot of the conversations that we in the Wisconsin chapter, which I've just adopted myself into because they're an amazing, I keep pointing, they're right there, they're fabulous. We have a lot of conversations about how do we develop young child programs? How do we develop caregiver support programs? And I'm having these conversations with organizations outside of Wisconsin and outside of the US as well. And one of the ways is get the kids involved in the research. Have them be able to tell you, this is what I need. This is my experience. Because we as adults can say, oh, let's do this, this, and this. And I know from years and years ago, I created a support group for kids. We sat in the circle, they all stared at each other, and they couldn't wait to get out of that room. They were like, ah, they said nothing and bolted. So then I realized, nah, that was pretty stupid. So I asked the kids what they would want. They wanted to go do kid things. So we went and played putt-putt golf. We went bowling. And as they were bowling, I was slipping in some support group questions, So, how's your dad, and they engaged with each other. They showed me that is how you work with kids and how you engage with kids. So whether it's creating research, creating support, creating programs, whatever it is, get the kids involved and don't leave them out of that conversation. I think I'm up. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Okay, we've time for a few questions here, so hands please, if you've got a question. Okay, we've got one in the middle.
More of a comment than a question. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Austin, Texas has a organization called Wonders and Worries. The only reason I know about it is one of our patients in Houston had their children go there, and they do a lot of different diseases, but they would hold on to things and learn about anatomy and different things, and it was very valid tools. So I would love to see us use the tools and the support groups that are already available in our communities as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, it's often up to the disease organization to really structure these things, and I think ALS has a place at the table.
Okay, a question at the back and then one down at the front. We'll take the back one first.
I can relate from both a personal, because I had a partner who died. It wasn't from ALS, but we had a child who was 2, and she was 3 when she died, and I got her involved in being able to do everything with my partner as she was dying. And she's still involved in a group in Chicago called Good Morning. It's a group for kids 3 through 18, and they group them according to age and developmental ability. And it's once a month, and it's fabulous for the kids. And it's all different diseases, but they've all lost either a parent or a significant other. And kids go there that have lost parents 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a way for them all to connect. And they have a retreat once a year.
Yeah. And this is in where?
Chicago.
Excellent. Excellent. Nice. Thank you. Thanks you for sharing that.
Okay, I had a question down at the front here. It's a race.
It's going to make it there first with the microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I moved. I'm from the ALS Association in Colombia.
Hello.
But I'm not a psychologist, but I'm here to talk because my dad has ALS for more than 11 years. So I was a young caregiver when I was
Bless you,
14,
yeah.
15. So I know what you're talking about. I know that feeling. And I want to talk, now that I'm an adult or young adult.
You're an adult.
It's,
It's okay.
Yeah, it's young caregivers become more hands-on people. Like, there's no obstacle right now, because once you face with living with ALS, everything is possible. Like, you can take, and that's what I'd like to see when you do more research, how it affects positively in their lives afterwards, because it is great. And I actually, my career, the one psychology, and I started with medicine and then psychology, it was all because of that coping mechanism I had with my dad being a young caregiver. And it is important to have information, like you said, because we all go like horses, and we're going from, because that's what our mothers and cousins are asking us to do. But if we have more information, we're able to help in a better way and in the appropriate way. So I think information is key to have a good young caregiver, and that will help them being more mature, hands-on, and conflict resolutions.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, and thanks once again, Melinda. We
Oh,
need to move
thank
on.
you.
Thank you.